as I mentioned before, have already transformed the way we understand, we analyze, the way we influence human behavior, the culture, society, institutions. First, we have computationally data-driven social science. So how big data actually shape the way we understand now social behavior and inequality. Big data allows researchers now to track behaviors at individual and group level across time and space. Social behavior, for example, mobility or online interaction or consumption, is now observable in real time and an unprecedented scale. For example, we can study inequality in urban mobility using ride-sharing or transit app data. We have new patterns of equality. Fine-grained data reveals hidden or emerging forms of social stratification. This enables the study of algorithmic biases, for example, credit scoring, hiring platforms, or predictive policing. For example, data showing differential access to internet services or digital education tools. Predictive or proactive insights. Models can forecast behavior or outcomes, for example, school dropout risk or job loss or health disparities. So policymakers can target interventions more precisely, but this also raises ethical concerns. So predictive models identifying at risk youth based on location social media use is a great example of this. Democratization, concentration of knowledge. We know that the open data sets now and APIs empower citizen researchers, but tech companies own and control most big data. So this raises what? This raises the issue of data divide. Who gets to study society and with what tools? Challenges to traditional theories. Big data questions long-held assumptions in sociology or economics by often unexpected correlations. So this encourages new computational theories of behavior, but may lack a deep contextual or qualitative insights. On the other hand, we know about these ethical and methodological considerations about interpretation. Do large dataset obscure causality? The issues of privacy, bias. We have example of some case studies. For example, the Facebook emotion contagion experiment. What showed emotional content can influence user mood. All these things raised ethical concerns. The Uber data, for example, another example, transportation inequality revealed disparities in ride availability and cost across neighborhoods. So all these ethical challenges that arise, of course, from AI, machine learning, and social research are related to transparency with manipulation, with exclusion, because AI-driven research that may exclude underrepresented groups if data is not diverse. So marginalization, lack of representativeness is the ethical concern, or the dual user misuse. Tools are developed for social good, yes, but may be repurposed or for surveillance or oppression. So the ethical concern is the unintended harmful application. For example, sentiment analysis, which is used by authoritarian governments to monitor dissent. The impact on researchers and participants. What is the challenge? The over-reliance on AI might de-skill researchers or obscure human judgment. So here, the ethical concern is reducing the role of critical human-centered analysis in social research. So in what ways? Now, we have also social network analysis. Social network analysis help us now to reveal dynamics in political and cultural movements. We can identify key influencers and gatekeepers, identify individuals, groups more critical to the movement. We can map communication, information flow. We can trace how ideas, slogans, or strategies spread through a network, revealing who initiates or amplifies key message. We can uncover hidden alliance or factions. So by visualizing the cluster structure using tools like modularity analysis, we can actually expose hidden coalitions or internal factions within a movement, or overlapping memberships or dual loyalties across different causes. We can track evolution over time. And dynamic social network analysis researchers now can observe how networks grow, how they shift leadership, or how they can reorganize after internal debates or crises. We can detect, of course, influence from external agents. We can enhance strategic mobilization, etc. So this is a powerful tool, social analysis network. for exposing the invisible architecture of political or cultural movements, revealing who holds power, how influence works, and what structural vulnerabilities or strengths exist beneath the surface. Examine some applications, how the Arab Spring movements, Black Lives Matter researchers used here this social network analysis to examine the role of hashtags of celebrities and local activists in sustaining momentum. Or it is used also in election disinformation. So this also social sciences, we are also related with AI algorithms and how these algorithms influence public opinion. How do these algorithms influence voting behavior or online identity formation? Algorithms curate news feeds, search results, and recommendations, creating filter bubbles, as we say, or echo chambers. So AI systems can personalize content, reinforcing users' existing beliefs and reducing exposure to dissenting views. For example, YouTube or TikTok recommendation algorithms, they amplify political or ideological content. What is the impact of voting behavior? Macro targeting in political campaigns, because AI-driven ads now tailor messages to individuals based on browsing history, on location, and personality characteristics. So this may increase voter mobilization or suppress turnout depending on the target group. For example, there was a Cambridge Analytica scandal where there was the use of Facebook, their data, they used Facebook data to manipulate voter behavior. Algorithmic identity formation, AI platforms shape how individuals express and perceive identity online. Gender, racial beliefs, identity is influenced by algorithmically driven feedback loops, likes, shares, engagement, and people may curate content or personas in order to fit algorithmic preferences or trends. For example, Instagram influencers, they use AI-optimized trends to boost visibility. And both deepfakes, synthetic media, what's happening there, AI-generated content, deepfakes can spread misinformation, simulate public opinion, or attack political opponents. So this raises questions about authenticity and trust in digital discourse. For example, Twitter bots spark discussions about elections, during elections or global crisis. And ethical, legal, regulatory issues, because users don't know how content is selected or promoted to them. So we talk about lack of transparency, algorithmic accountability, who is responsible for harmful or misleading outcomes, and disinformation regulation. Can AI content moderation balance free speech or misinformation? The case here is in Brazil and India in the elections, where there were WhatsApp forwards and AI-based targeting led to misinformation campaigns. And other also examples related to this. Chatbots, of course, virtual agents play a big role in shaping human communication. We have new forms of human-machine interaction, how this changes human norms and expectations. People are adjusting now how they communicate, how they express emotion, or how they seek help based on AI responses. So the rise of what we call machine politeness. What this machine politeness means that users now use manners or empathy even with no sentient bots. So chatbots may encourage disclosure or sensitive information, of course, due to their perceived non-judgmental nature. The virtual companionship and emotional support, instant AI agents are used in companions, especially among isolated or aging populations. The automation, of course, of everyday communication, business use these chatbots, multilingual bots break language barriers also, and the ethical and social challenges are there with deception. People may form emotional bonds or be misled by human-like communication. So how social scientists can contribute to making AI systems more equitable and inclusive by identifying and address bias by contextualizing data and design. By this participatory inclusive design, social scientists actually facilitate community engagement and participatory methods in order to ensure that marginalized voices are included in the AI design process. So they advocate for what we call co-design processes, co-design approaches, where communities help define problems, not just to react to solutions. By evaluating social impact through policy and governance guidance, social scientists contribute to the creation of regulatory policy frameworks that promote equitable AI use. And by bridging disciplines, because social scientists act as translators between technical teams and affected communities, helping developers this way to understand lived experiences and social dynamics that data alone can't capture. Now, we have another field, the digital ethnography. The digital ethnography, of course, differs from traditional ethnography in terms of first, the field site. Traditional ethnography takes place in physical settings. On the other hand, digital ethnography is online, has to do with online communities. The traditional, it has to do with face-to-face and body interactions. On the other hand, we have digital ethnographers who rely on avatars, on memes, on live streams as communicative act. The ethnography which used in terms of data collection, the traditional, we have participant observation, interviews, note-taking. Now with digital ethnography, we have screen recording, we have social media scrapping, digital diary, chat logs. And now this allows access to archived conversations, multimedia expressions, etc. So many differences, some examples of this we can mention, for example, Reddit communities and activism, or Instagram ethnography of youth identity, fashion, or protest, a game world like Roblox or World of Warcraft as social arenas with norms, hierarchies, and rituals. So what the critical questions are raising now? Is digital ethnography less authentic or just differently authentic? How can digital ethnographers build trust without physical presence? And what does it mean to be a participant observer when algorithms mediate the field? These are critical questions that we need to have in mind. Many insights can be gained from study communities on platforms like TikTok. We can gain valuable insights into modern behavior, cultural trends, how ideas, styles, and values spread and evolve, how people present and construct identities, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, political beliefs on these platforms, how these communities form, operate, and enforce norms, how influence is gained and exercised, including who becomes an influencer or moderator. What topics matter to people, how people and how opinions are formed and polarized, and social movements and activism, how digital platforms are used to mobilize, educate, organize collective action. For more mental health also, we have amazing progress in this domain. We have also mental health apps which are used from this platform, so how people express and cope with emotions. Here we can follow also the trend, for example, TikTok trend of users sharing personal struggles through music or humor reveals new modes of vulnerability, the consumer behavior, the digital inequality, etc. So how can researchers ethically engage with online spaces where anonymity or deception are common? Of course, we need to obtain informed consent before, when, of course, it's possible. We talk about social science. In spaces with persistent usernames or communities, researchers can seek permission through private messaging, for example, or community moderators. And when informed consent is not feasible, for example, we have large-scale data scrapping, then researchers must justify the lack of consent and demonstrate minimal risk of harm. So the best practice here is to always anonymize usernames, paraphrase codes to reduce traceability unless public figures are involved. Try to minimize harm. Use ethical review boards effectively. Not all ethical review boards are well versed in online research. Researchers should proactively explain the nature of space, justify decisions around anonymity, and propose strategies for harm reduction. Very important, the account, of course, avoid participatory deception unless justified, but here the important is the account for the nature of anonymity and identity. In anonymous spaces, identities may be fluid or performative or deliberately misleading, so researchers should avoid treating anonymous data as authentic personal representation without triangulation or context. So be cautious about overinterpreting behaviors, especially when deception or irony is part of the culture. This ethical research in deceptive or anonymous online spaces requires nuance, transparency, and care. Researchers must treat users not just as data points, but as people with rights, expectations, and vulnerabilities, even when identities are masked. So what has happened with experimental non-behavioral research? There are was we have the randomized controlled trials, but there are limitations. The limitations of these trials in addressing complex social problems. These are taking place in controlled or limited settings, but they not usually reflect real-world complexities. Why? Because social problems are embedded into in broader social, cultural, economic, political contexts that these randomized controlled trials struggle to capture. So results from one setting may not generalize to others. We talk about limited external validity. Second, reductionist or simplification. Complex social phenomena involve multiple interactive factors, but these randomized control trials isolate one variable at a time. This can oversimplify causality, miss important structural or systemic influences. For example, interventions targeting individual behavior may ignore institutional barriers. And of course, the ethical concerns and the cost, the lack of qualitative insight, etc. So behavioral, also we have behavioral economics. It's also very interesting. Here we can provide practical insights into how people actually make decisions, often deviating from purely rational models. And this understanding helps policymakers design more effective targeted interventions in areas like health or finance or education. In health policy, for example, or financial policy or education, talk about education, how this helps. Behavioral nudges, like text reminders to students or parents, improve attendance and reduce dropouts. Experiments show that breaking down tasks into smaller goals and providing feedback increases motivation, so encouraging study habits. Interventions such as growth mindset messages informed by behavioral science help improve student confidence and performance. And of course, simplifying enrollment because making application processes for financial aid or school enrollment simpler, this increases uptake. So the overall impact is the cost-effective interventions. Behavioral insights often lead to low-cost but high-impact policy tweaks. Personalization because experiments help identify what works best for different populations. And real-world testing because field experiments validate policies in real settings before scaling. The lab-based findings also can be translated in real-world settings. Because this involves bridging the gap between controlled experimental conditions and the complexity of everyday life. So we need to increase here ecological validity, design experiments that mimic real-world conditions as closely as possible. For example, use realistic scenarios or naturalistic stimuli, incorporate variables that reflect real social environments, such as social norms or diversity of participants. Try to replicate findings in field settings, use mixed method approach, of course, identify raters and engage stakeholders early, etc. The participatory also community-based methods, the benefits, of course, are we have many benefits because here we can empower and we can involve community members as co-researchers, fostering a sense of ownership and agency. We can help them build knowledge, competence within marginalized groups. We can encourage self-determination rather than imposing external solutions. The contextual relevance, because research questions and interventions are grounded in local realities, cultural priorities, so results here tend to be more relevant, acceptable, and sustainable for the community, and this supports culturally sensitive and tailored solutions. Of course, this promotes also social justice and advocacy because of explicit aim to address power imbalances. And always remember that participatory research is cyclical, allowing continuous reflection, learning, and adaptation. We talk about iterative and flexible process, which encourages dialogue, collaboration, and trust building. On the other hand, there are limitations. And what are the limitations of this participatory action research? It's time intensive and resource demanding because this requires long-term engagement and sustained relationships. It can be challenging to secure finding and maintain momentum over extended periods. Another limitation is the power dynamics within communities. Marginalized communities are not homogeneous. There are internal hierarchies that exist or conflicts that can affect participation. So risk of domination by vocal or privileged groups within the community is a big risk, and researchers must carefully navigate and mediate power imbalances. The challenges in balancing roles, researchers must balance between facilitator, advocate, and evaluator, which can create tension, so maintaining academic rigor while ensuring participatory processes can be difficult. And the ethical complexities, managing expectations about outcomes and impacts. This requires transparency. The issues of confidentiality, informed consent that I mentioned, ownership of data can be complicated when community is deeply involved. The citizen science is a very interesting also trend now, popular trend. Citizen science where here all members of the public actively participate in the research can greatly improve data quality and community trust by enhancing data quality. Citizen scientists can gather data across wide geographic areas and timeframes that would be impossible for researchers alone, increasing sample size and diversity. Community members often have deep understanding of their environment, leading to more accurate observations and context-aware data. We have seen how many amateur astronomers, for example, have made important scientific discoveries, and they don't have any degree in astronomy or astrophysics. Everybody can contribute to science. This is the meaning and the philosophy behind citizen science. We talk about crowdsourced validation. Multiple participants can cross-check and verify data, for example, species identification, reducing this way errors and decreasing reliability. The rapid feedback loops, citizen involvement enables quick detection of anomalies or issues, allowing researchers to refine protocols in real time. So first is this, and has to do with data quality. Of course, building community trust, because involving citizens in the research process demystifies science, making methods and goals more transparent. When people contribute to research that affects their community, they feel a sense of ownership, fostering trust and positive attitudes towards science. And of course, there is a relevance here to local concerns, because citizen scientists often address issues directly impacting participants, making research outcomes more meaningful and trustworthy. Direct communication also between scientists and community members facilitates dialogue. So we talk about improved communication. Examples of this impact of citizen science is focus on environmental monitoring, public health surveillance, and the challenges, of course, are related with training and support, the feedback to participants, and the ethical considerations. So research participators, in what ways can become co-creators, and how this challenge academic hierarchies? This is very interesting, because here, traditional research, what is happening is in positioned academics as experts and participants as passive subject. Co-creation now in academics means this shares decision power making, giving participants agency over research questions, method interpretation. This challenges the top-down model where researchers control all aspects. So we have distribution of power agency now. Other aspect is that academics typically prioritize formal or objective knowledge. Co-creation, on the other hand, elevates participants' lived experience and insights as valid and essential sources of knowledge. And this disrupts the hierarchy that privileges academic expertise over community wisdom. Instead of researchers producing findings in isolation, co-creation fosters joint ownership of data analysis and outcomes, and this blurs the line between researcher and research, emphasizing partnership and reciprocity. Traditional ethics focus on protection and consent. Co-creation emphasizes on trust, respect, and ongoing relationships, requiring researchers to be accountable beyond the study's end. And of course, methodological innovations, because involving participants or co-creators often leads to new research methods that are participatory, flexible, or context-specific. And this contests the dominance of standardized objective methodologies favored in academia. So we have a challenging academic gatekeeping. Co-creation can democratize access to knowledge, production, dissemination. Participants may contribute now to or lead publications, presentations, policy advocacy, and these questions about who gets credit and recognition in academic work. So the traditional hierarchy and the shift now with participants as co-creators, it's very interesting, because it disrupts traditional academic hierarchies by fostering more equitable, collaborative, and inclusive research partnerships. Of course, interdisciplinarity is another issue. For example, neurosocial approaches. You know my passion about neuroscience. Neurosocial approaches try to combine now neuroscience techniques with social science theories to study how the brain processes social information now. And this information, this integration, it helps reveal how social identities and group memberships are represented and maintained in the brain. Neuroscientific tools now can map how self-concept and social identity, for example, gender or ethnicity or political affiliation, activate specific brain regions. And this shows how identity is both a neural and social phenomenon, shaped by interaction and cultural context. For example, brain responses to in-group versus out-group members. And we can map now emotional processes in social context. Neurosocial research reveals how emotions like empathy or shame or anger are generated and regulated during social interactions. This helps explain emotional responses linked to social rejection or inclusion or discrimination. So this enables the study of emotional contagion and group cohesion at a neural level. And brain imaging also shows how social norms and peer influence impact decision-making and conformity. Here we can investigate the neural basis of trust, of cooperation, of conflict within groups. We can clarify mechanisms behind group polarization or collective action. And bridging micro and macro levels, because neurosocial approaches link individual level brain activity with macro level social phenomena, such as cultural institutions or social networks. And this offers a multi-level understanding of how social structures affect the cognition and behavior. Of course, there are challenges, the risks of what we call biological reductionism, overemphasizing brain processes without sufficient attention to social context that could be a risk, methodological complexities in combining qualitative social data with quantitative neurodata is also something that we need to have in mind, and ethical issues about interpretation of neural data in social research is another issue. So how can neurosocial methods inform interventions to reduce prejudice or improve group relations? One critical question. Another question, what are the limitations of neuroscientific tools in capturing the fluidity of identity, and how might culture shape neural responses in different social contexts? Integration of genetics and sociology reveal a lot about health inequalities, gene-environment interactions, by unpacking health disparities beyond genetics. The blending of environmental science also in anthropology create new pathways now for climate justice, integrating a scientific understanding of ecological systems with deep insights into human cultures. We have the sensor-based mobile research now. We can use wearable devices, smartphone data, which contribute to real-time social research by mapping residential segregation patterns, by modeling spatial inequality through temporal change and trend analysis, through the scenario planning simulation and participatory mapping, because now we can engage communities in mapping exercises in order to validate data and incorporate local knowledge about various informal services. So privacy consent issues arise, of course, when we use this biometric location tracking. This is, of course, normal. There are informed consent challenges also, data security, risk of breaches. Geospatial tools can be applied also to study urban segregation, and conceptual theoretical innovation. Intersectionality, it's very important. Why it is important? Because traditional approaches often examine inequalities one dimension at a time. Now, intersectionality insists that identities and oppressions do not act independently, but interlock, creating a unique and compounded form of disadvantage or privilege. So this moves beyond single-axis analysis, reveals complex and layered experiences. We can highlight how systems of power interact, and this centers, of course, marginalized voices. It challenges dominant narratives that often center the most privileged within any single category. Of course, the applications of post-anthropocentric theories for studying human-environment relationships. Post-anthropocentric theories reshape how we study human-environment relationships by challenging the traditional human-centered worldview and by emphasizing the agency and value of non-human actors in ecosystems. How? By decentering the human subject, because post-anthropocentrism moves away from viewing humans as the dominant or sole important actors It treats humans as part of a broader ecological network where no human entities, animals, plants, or technologies or landscapes have agency and intrinsic worth, and this shifts research focus to more than human interactions. Rethinking agency, because no human actors are considered active participants shaping environments and not just a passive resource or backdrops. And this calls for studying entanglements and mutual influences rather than linear cause-effect relations centered on humans. Research must consider the rights now, the well-being, flourishing of a wider range of beings. These are important issues. Post-anthropocentric theories push researchers to actually reimagine human-environment relations as deeply interconnected multi-actor processes, broadening ethical and methodological horizons and paving the way, of course, for more holistic, responsible, and environmental scholarship and practice. And finally, before concluding, we have the concept of networked individualism, which actually redefines traditional ideas of community. And this actually how it is doing it by shifting the focus from bounded place-based groups to personalized, flexible networks centered around individuals. We have personalized social connections, decentralization of social life, increased mobility, flexibility, and challenges to collective identity. Networked individualism redefines community as a set of personalized, shifting networks that empower individual agency but challenge traditional ideas. So by integrating all these technologies, big data analytics, artificial intelligence, digital ethnography, researchers can now uncover patterns and insights previously unimaginable. Interdisciplinary approaches, intersectionality have broken traditional silos, allowing collaboration between sociology, economics, psychology, political science, and even natural sciences. And these advances not only deepen academic knowledge, but they also contribute to more effective policymaking, inclusive governance, and sustainable development. So thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I request each and everyone to give the big hand to Dr. Rania Lampou, madam, for such an incredible presentation, iconic presentation on this platform. Thank you very much.